and welcome back to another episode of Let's Celebrate, a holiday origins podcast. I'm your host, Rusty Brown, and today we're celebrating Midsummer. And I'll be discussing the truth about this Scandinavian holiday that doesn't include ritualistic sacrifices or suicide, if you thought that had anything to do with this. As you can see, I'm trying something new today, and you might be hearing some birds in the background because I am recording by a lake today. And of course, as soon as I set up my hammock here to record, it looks like a storm is coming. So we'll see how long I can sit out here and record until it gets too bad. I am sitting here with a lot of electronics, so probably not a good idea to be sitting out here when it's about to rain. But we'll just play it by ear, and I might have to go inside and record the rest of it if it gets too bad. So anyways, for anybody who's new here, this is the podcast where each episode I research a specific holiday and discuss the history behind it, how the people before us celebrated it, how it evolved into what we celebrate now, and then I look at how we can incorporate traditional ways of celebrating back into the holidays so that we can reconnect to why we're celebrating in the first place. Each episode includes a CeLibation, that's a themed cocktail with a mocktail option to go with the holiday that you can make at home to celebrate along with me as you listen. The CeLibation for this episode is a take on a Bee Norwegian, and I didn't have any Aquavit, which is what the original calls for. I did have Aquadiente, I think is what it's called. It's from Colombia, and it's not the same really, but it's the closest that I could find here. So you're going to need 2 ounces of either the Aquadiente or Aquavit, 1 ounce of honey simple syrup, and 1 ounce of lime juice. You're going to pour all the ingredients in a shaker over ice, shake and strain into a glass. You can also garnish with a lemon wheel if you're feeling fancy. For the mocktail, you can make a Honey Limeade by mixing lime juice and a honey simple syrup and either adding more water to make it a full glass, or you could add some sparkling mineral water or something like a Sprite if you want a sparkling beverage. So last month's episode was about Mother's Day, and if you listened to that episode and decided to incorporate some new or old but new to you traditions into your celebrations, I'd love to hear about how you celebrated. You can email me at letscelebrate.podcast@gmail.com with your celebratory stories. I have also created an Instagram page that you can follow, and that is also at Let's Celebrate Podcast on Instagram. So I celebrated Mother's Day this year in Japan with my sister and her family. She just had a baby, so she's got a newborn at home. So I started the day by taking the baby downstairs and giving her a bath and a bottle so my sister could sleep in. And once my sister woke up, we went to a Hawaiian restaurant for lunch and did some shopping. And then we went back to her home and her husband cooked dinner for us. It was a pretty low-key celebration. We just focused on what my sister wanted to do since she's the new mother. I also sent a gift to my own mother and wished her a happy Mother's Day. So now we're going to discuss Midsummer. And this feels really close to home to me because this is kind of like one of the original holidays that got me interested in wanting to learn more about holidays, because I, a couple of years ago, started reconnecting to my Swedish heritage because I never grew up learning about Swedish things. We didn't celebrate any kind of Swedish holidays. So I wanted to reconnect to my Swedish heritage, and this was one of the first holidays because it was around this time of the year that I started looking into what Midsummer is. So, I'll tell you about it. First, we're going to start with a little bit of the history behind Midsummer. So to begin to look at the history or the origins of Midsummer, we first need to look at the summer solstice, because ultimately that's what people are celebrating when they celebrate Midsummer. This day has been celebrated since the Neolithic era by the Nordic nations, Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland. The summer solstice is the longest day of the year because it's when the sun is at its furthest point from the equator and the sun also reaches its highest point in the sky. And since it's the longest day, it also makes it the shortest night of the year, with some areas within and near the Arctic Circle not even having a night, or some areas have only an hour to 2 hour night during this time of year. After the summer solstice, the days grow shorter until the winter solstice in mid-December. It's the opposite of Christmas, the same way that Beltane was the opposite of Halloween, which makes Midsummer Christmas's counter-holiday. This also means that we're halfway to the holiday season. This is why it's called Midsummer. It marks the midpoint of the year, and historically it marks the midpoint of the growing season, halfway between planting and harvest. It's traditionally known as one of the 4 quarter days in some cultures. Nowadays, the summer solstice and midsummer are celebrated on different days. Some people think that this is because of the differences in the Julian and the Gregorian calendars. The summer solstice generally happens on June 21st every year, and midsummer happens on the Friday closest to June 23rd. So it's usually between June 19th and the 25th. So it becomes a long weekend. And most people actually start celebrating the Thursday before. So the Vikings knew that they needed to take advantage of the longer days by hunting, settling disputes, and conducting raids to maximize their productivity. Many ancient midsummer traditions or rituals include a huge bonfire. This was believed to ward off dark forces or evil spirits that people believed were stronger on the longest day of the year, because the same way that people think that Halloween and Christmas time, the veil is thinner between dead and the living, people also believed that this time of the year, the veil was thinner. In folklore, midsummer was thought to be a time of magic, and plants were also said to have magical powers. There were myths that told of the sun standing still or the world turning upside down on midsummer. One custom in Scandinavia is for single women to pick 7 flowers and place them under their pillow on Midsummer Eve to invoke a dream of their future husbands. And we can't have a pagan holiday without the Christian Church reforming it into a saint's day. So now we have St. John's Day, which is also celebrated on Midsummer, or around this time of the year. St. John's Day is celebrated on June 24th and is said to be the birthday of St. John the Baptist, because in the Bible his birthday is said to be 6 months before Jesus' birthday or Christmas. Most people begin celebrating on St. John's Eve at sunset on June 23rd. Traditional ways of celebrating include watching the sunrise or sunset and bathing in bodies of water and, of course, bonfires. As you can see, the Christian and pagan rituals merged, and it's become a good blend of the two and gives everyone a reason to celebrate. And most people don't celebrate it as a Catholic holiday these days. In the 19th century, some Christians would act out baptisms for the children who had died as pagans. There are still many countries in the Northern Hemisphere who celebrate St. John's Day instead of or in addition to Midsummer's Day. In Finland, St. John's Day is a national holiday and they call it Juhannus. They celebrate with a long weekend by retreating to summer homes, relaxing in saunas, and lighting large bonfires or cocos, which were traditionally for warding off evil spirits and to encourage an abundant harvest. The entire celebration is about connecting to nature by retreating into nature. The Finnish have some fun old beliefs about getting drunk on Midsummer. One is that the louder a person is while celebrating Midsummer, the more luck they would experience in the year ahead. And another is that the more a person drinks on Midsummer, the better their harvest would be. So now let's take a look at how this time of the year was celebrated in the past. Many people would begin celebrating the night before on Midsummer's Eve, which is usually on or near the shortest night of the year. On Midsummer Eve, many people built bonfires and danced and feasted the night away. The Celtic, Slavic, and Germanic people lit bonfires because they believed that it boosted the sun's strength and ensured a healthy harvest for the rest of the crop season. As early as the 1500s, people would decorate their houses and farm tools with foliage and raise a maypole to dance around. Maypoles are referred to as midsummer poles or midsummer stång in Swedish for this time of the year because the maypole is actually for Beltane or May Day. They were said to bring good fortune and health specifically for farming. The midsummer pole was traditionally a tall pole covered in green foliage with a horizontal ring at the top that ropes were tied to. The shape is thought to be a procreation symbol. Children do ring dances around the pole, holding onto the ropes as they dance and hold hands and spin in circles. A traditional maypole dance in Sweden is called Små grodarna, which translates as the little frogs. And this dance requires the dancers to jump around like frogs as they go around the pole. People would also clad themselves in fern to dress as green men during this time of the year for the celebrations, kind of similar to Beltane. In industrial communities of central Sweden, mill employees would receive a feast of pickled herring, beer, and schnapps from their employers on Midsummer. And in the 1900s, this tradition of eating this particular meal became a huge part of how the Swedish would celebrate Midsummer, and still today. So, how do people celebrate today? In Sweden, Midsummer is the beginning of their summer holiday and is a national holiday, second only to Christmas. So many people retreat to the countryside to celebrate Midsummer Eve. Many towns shut down and streets are deserted. In most cases, entire families have large gatherings on Midsummer Eve and Midsummer at their country homes. At the beginning of the day, people start by picking flowers and foliage. Women and children create garlands of wild flower to wear in their hair and make wreaths to put on the midsummer pole. The midsummer pole is then raised and decorated with some of the foliage that they've collected, and then, like I mentioned, the tradition of children doing ring dances around the pole is still practiced. Pickled herring is also still a featured menu item of Midsummer, along with grilled meat and a potato salad made with fresh dill, sour cream, and chives. And for dessert, fresh strawberries and cream. The traditional drink accompaniment is a cold beer and spiced schnapps, or Aquavit. And there's a tradition that every time glasses are refilled, people begin singing. After dinner, many people find an outdoor dance floor beside a lake or other natural setting to continue the party. Legend says that Midsummer Eve is a magical time for love, which makes Midsummer a popular time for weddings and christening ceremonies. Some Swedes still have a flower-bedecked country church wedding with beautiful hymns sung on Midsummer. Some people think that the association with Midsummer and love magic might have to do with the amount of alcohol consumed on these days, since the influence of alcohol can put relationships to the test, for better or worse. A midsummer drinking tradition in Sweden is to take shots of vodka or aquavit and sing the Swedish drinking song Helangar. I recommend that you listen to this song because it's really cute. It seems that Helon is a bird, and Helongar translates to Helen goes, so it's kind of talking about like what Helon the bird does. In Norway, Midsummer has a fixed date of June 23rd, but it's not a national holiday like it is in other countries like Sweden, and they call it Jonsok or Sankthansaften. Norwegians celebrate by lighting huge bonfires to make sure that the evil spirits don't linger around, and then they also cook out and play games. In northern Norway, they experience the midnight sun from mid-May to mid-July, and the sun doesn't set at all during this time. In Denmark, they also celebrate the summer solstice festivities on June 23rd, like Norway. They refer to this day as Sankthansaften, and the Danes build bonfires, but they take it a step further by tossing twigs and cloth effigies of witches into the fire to make sure that the evil spirits are scared away. In Iceland, they celebrate John's Messe, or Mass of John Baptist, on June 24th. Despite being associated with St. John's Day, Iceland's summer solstice traditions are more superstitious than religious. There are myths that during this time of the year, cows can speak, seals become human, and it's said that elves interact with people. They also believe that the morning dew brings good fortune, so many people roll around naked in the morning dew or wash their faces with it. In Lithuania, Midsummer is celebrated as Joninės, or some people call it Rosos, which means dew holiday, because many people wash their faces with the morning dew as a way to greet the midsummer sun. Some other Rosos traditions include singing and dancing, jumping over the bonfires, and searching for a magic fern flower at midnight. Ferns don't have flowers, but it's said that they bloom on this night only, and they are thought to be linked to the spirit world. So if you find one, you may be endowed with the ability to understand animals and earthly riches. In Latvia, they also search for a fern blossom late at night, but they believe it to be a luck charm for lovers. People also celebrate with bacon pie and sweet beer. In Estonia, they celebrate Jaanipäev, or Jean's Day, on the night of June 23rd. This evening, they dance, sing, eat, and drink, and of course, they have a bonfire. They have an extra tradition of jumping over the bonfire to dispel bad luck. And then in Greece, there's a 2,500-year solstice tradition where locals hike to the peak of Mount Olympus, the home of Greek gods. And that has an elevation of 9,573 feet, so it's quite a trek. In Britain, people flock to the ancient Stonehenge monument to dance and play drums for the sun solstice peak. In Krakow, Poland, girls make flower and herb wreaths and float them down the Wisła River, and this is used as a divination. So if a boy picks up a girl's garland, the belief is that they will get married, and if the wreath sinks, it's believed that the girl will die young. And it's also believed that if two girls throw their wreaths in and they connect in the water, that symbolizes those two girls' lifelong friendship. In Rome, people believe that by eating horned snails that they will be protected from devilry, since the devil has horns. And in northern Italy, this time of year is when the grapes are entering a critical stage of development, and many people prepare dishes made of aged balsamic vinegar. So, what's with the ritualistic death and suicide that some people might associate with Midsummer these days? Most people may not have heard about the Midsummer Festival until watching the horror movie entitled Midsummer. In the movie, the main character visits a Swedish commune with friends for the Midsummer festival that happens every 90 years. And during the festival, the friends encounter traditions that include ritualistic suicide of 72-year-old locals called Atastupa, and a ritualistic sacrifice that involved a bear carcass. So the Midsummer movie combines ancient folklore with basic Midsummer traditions and a lot of imagination. So I did a little research because I was wondering, after watching that movie, if those had any actual significance, if there was really historic evidence that things like that went on for Midsummer. Because I don't know, I didn't know anything about Midsummer before I started researching it. What I found is that the movie's set in a real town in Sweden called Harga, and that town has a legend known as Hargalaten, which translates to the Hargan song, and that song is about the devil coming to Harga, and he's disguised as a fiddler, and he tricks the young people into dancing the night away, and he takes them up to the top of a hill in the town, and they just dance until they die. And that's pretty much the story of the Hargalaten. And then we have the Atastupa, which is a name given to several precipices in Sweden. Those precipices are said to be where elderly people in the Nordic, pagan, prehistoric times who were no longer able to help around the home would jump from to relieve their families from the burden of having to care for them into their old age. The word Atastupa came from an old Icelandic saga from the 17th century called Gotrek saga. However, at the end of the 19th century, a Swedish linguist named Adolf Noreen questioned the myth and found that no other Old Norse text contained any references to Atastupa. So now it's generally accepted that the practice never actually existed. I tried to find some information about the connection with the ritualistic sacrifice of one of the characters in a bear carcass, but it seems that it's not historically accurate at all and was definitely something created as a horror element for the movie. In Norse or Viking mythology, and also for the Sami people in northern Sweden, bears were seen as sacred animals. The highest class of Viking warriors, called berserkers, would wear bear skins as battle armor, and the Sami people had a bear ritual that involved killing a bear and bringing it back to the village, and after 3 days they would stretch the bear's skin out in the center of the banquet area, and they would put libations, tobacco, and food items laid out as offerings to the bear's spirit. Someone would then give a speech apologizing to the bear, and then they would feast on the bear meat. It's all very respectful to the bear, and no humans were sacrificed, only the bear. The writer-director Ari Aster took some Midsummer facts and intertwined them with a lot of imagination and horror themes. So, how can we incorporate traditional ways of celebrating into our celebrations today? First of all, this year Midsummer falls on Friday, June 23rd, 2023. For ancient pagan Celtic people who inhabited the British Islands and modern Scandinavians who experienced almost continuous sunlight at this time of the year, the summer solstice is a magical time, one of new beginnings, celebrated with bonfires and festivals. So, the most obvious way to celebrate Midsummer is by building a bonfire, either on Midsummer's Eve or Midsummer's Day, or both. This time is still a time to connect to nature by retreating into it. So most of the Midsummer traditions include going out into nature and touching the grass and the plants and soaking up the sun. Go to the countryside and have a picnic with friends in a field. Go to a park or near a body of water. Eat some pickled herring if you can get your hands on some, and make a potato salad and grill some meat with a dessert of the freshest fruits that are in season in your area. Pick some flowers and put them in your hair, or make a flower crown. Create a flower or vine wreath and toss it into a river or a body of water and see what the future has in store for you. Or you could go into the woods or forest or whatever is closest to you, jungle, and see if you can find a magical fern flower and hope to learn to talk to animals. You could also have a traditional drink of beer and spiced schnapps, or try some Aquavit if you can find some in a local store. You can also listen to some traditional midsummer music. There's a podcast called Fair Folk that has a traditional playlist for June that might help you get into the mood of midsummer. I definitely recommend that you listen to the Swedish drinking song Hellengar and look up the translation, like I said, because it is a cute song about a bird singing in a pine forest. This is also a good time to just reflect on your present moment and celebrate the longer days, because after this, the days will begin to grow shorter and shorter, and you might wish that you had spent more time outdoors when you had more sunlight. So that wraps it up for this episode, and I'll be back in July to discuss America's Independence Day, also known as July 4th. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, please like and subscribe, and maybe even leave a review. Do you celebrate Midsummer or Midsummer or St. John's Day maybe? I would love to hear your celebratory stories. Feel free to send me an email at letscelebratepodcast@gmail.com. Or don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Let's Celebrate Podcast. All of my references are in the show notes if you're interested in reading more about midsummer traditions. And thanks for listening and joining me on this adventure. Have fun celebrating, and I hope you've learned something new today.